Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be continuing the series of aviary release videos by releasing this beautiful pair of red-throat parrot finches. If you're not familiar with this species, the red-throat parrot finches is native to New Caledonia, which is located in the South Pacific. New Caledonia is a French territory comprising of dozens of islands that are known for their palm-lined beaches and marine life-rich lagoons, which at 24,000 square kilometers is among the world's largest. This beautiful little gem is a delight to keep in any aviary. I've been working with this species for a couple of years now, and hopefully in today's video I can share a couple of tips and tricks that might help you out if you're working with these species in order to get them to breed. Although not as colorful when compared to other parrot finch species, which usually have 3 or more colors, the red throat is still a delight to look at. The combinations of the green and the red make it a very attractive species to mix in with other birds inside of the aviary if you're looking to add some color. I consider the red-throat parrot finches to be a passive species of Erythrurids, even though there are those who consider them to be a bit pushy or an aggressive species and decide not to mix them in a collection of smaller Erythrid finches. With my experience, I've noticed that when placed in a collection, they have their place. They are not an aggressive species and they don't chase other birds around. Now keep in mind that when birds start to breed, the majority of them will get into this breeding behavior where they will protect their territory, especially if they have a nest. And I've noticed this with even smaller species of waxbills like the orange breast. Once they pick a location and decide to build the nest, they will get aggressive and territorial of that location. So they'll end up chasing even bigger birds out of that general area, and this is no exception with any other species like the red throats. So for those who seem them a little bit aggressive, it could very well be because they're territorial of a nest site or a specific place in the aviary. Keep in mind that also the aviary or the place, cage, flight that you put them in has to be the adequate size for this species and others if you're going to keep them in a mixed collection. If you tend to overcrowd, if you don't have multiple nest sites, multiple feeding sites, the birds do get a bit aggressive over food, over water, and over nest locations. So the bigger the area and the least amount of birds possible will make for a better mixed collection. This species is not very difficult to condition to breed. They will breed readily as long as you have a male and a female, and this may be the biggest problem for a majority of breeders working with this species. If you're getting into these pairs, since they are monomorphic, meaning which they only exist in one form, it can be very difficult to distinguish the difference between the males and the females. I'm not going to get into the specific details of that in this video since I've already made a video about that recently, and I will place that link of that video in the description box below if you're interested in learning how to sex these birds. But assuming that you already have a true pair of a male and a female, they can be easily conditioned to breed on a regular seed diet while adding a variety of sprouted seeds and a bit of egg food from time to time. Now you must be very careful when giving this species egg food as they are gluttons. This is something that if you offer on a daily basis, they will eat it all the time and it'll eventually make them fat and overweight. Unfortunately, this species is prone to obesity, and once they reach that stage where they get fat or obese, it becomes very difficult to get them to breed. Personally, I condition all of my pairs with a good mixture of sprouted seeds, and this is usually good enough to get the pairs into breeding condition as the sprouted seeds are a great source of protein without all the extra added fats that come with the egg food. So it's a great way to make sure that your pairs get into the proper breeding conditions without getting them overweight. I also offer them egg food, but not as often. Egg food will be offered to these pairs once or twice a week. Now, once the pairs have hatched chicks, this all changes, and we'll go into that a little bit later on in the video. After 2 to 3 weeks of giving these pairs a good sprouted seed mixture, we can see that they get into the proper breeding condition and they will begin to mate. Now, these birds do not mate the same way that most Erythrids or waxbill species mate, where the males will grab a piece of leaf or a piece of stem in their mouth and begin to perform a dance or a courtship display for the females. These birds are completely different in that aspect. Parrot finches can be very aggressive when they breed, and they more resemble almost like the breeding behaviors of chickens, where the roosters will chase the females and mount them. And this is the same method that the parrot finches use. So this is why it is always good to keep them in a big enclosure or a big cage in case the females are not properly conditioned yet, so they can get away from the males. But assuming that both have been properly conditioned, they will begin to look for a nesting site or a nesting location. Now these birds, they prefer to nest inside of cavities almost similar to the Goldie finches, and very rarely do they build their own freestanding nest. And this was one of the problems that I had inside of the aviary. While breeding them in cages, I always offer a nest box, but inside of the aviary, I try to keep it as natural as possible, not putting any type of nest boxes in there. But this really wasn't a problem for them, as they were great at finding a nest site. Although I really didn't approve of the location, I have to say that they get an A for effort. They found a very specific location that had a cavity within the waterfall feature and decided to nest in there. Now it took me quite some time to figure out exactly where it was that they were nesting, but at the end I decided to look around the waterfall and I ended up finding this very particular nest. Now guys, when I tell you that this is the most unique nest I have ever seen, it is 100% that. I've never had a species of finch build a nest in a location like this. Even some of the other aviary residents were amazed at how bold these red-throat parrot finches were to build their nest underneath of a rock. Once the hens begin to lay, they will usually lay anywhere from 2 to 6 eggs. From personal experience, usually it's always been 4 or 5, and out of those 4 or 5, usually 3 or 4 chicks will survive. They'll incubate the eggs for around 12 to 14 days before the chicks hatch, and once the chicks hatch, both parents will feed the young for an additional 20 days to 25 before these chicks fledge. After the chicks fledge, they will continue to care for the young for an additional 3 to 4 weeks before I decide to separate them from the parents. By this time, the young are already eating on their own and they are fully fledged and weaned. If you plan on breeding this species in cages, don't get discouraged just by looking at these in the outdoor aviary thinking you may have a hard time breeding yours inside of the cages. That's not the case. As long as you condition them properly the same way that I explained here, you'll be able to do the same exact thing inside cages. The majority of the breeding that I do with these parrot finches is in cages. Personally, I use sizes that are 32 by 18 by 18 and 24 by 16 by 16. These are my 2 preferred sizes for cages when breeding this species. Something that I've noticed with this species is that the size of the cage is really irrelevant as long as they have the proper nutrition in order to get them into breeding condition. So as long as you follow the first steps that I gave you as far as getting them into condition by properly giving them the right amount of sprouted seeds on a daily basis, along with egg food once or twice a week, you shouldn't have a problem breeding them in your cages. As I've seen breeders that breed these in canary style cages that are much smaller than the ones that I've mentioned above. Now when it comes time for them to feed their chicks, you want to increment the amount of protein that you offer. Once the chicks hatch, I usually give my pairs egg food on a daily basis along with sprouted seeds. Usually what I end up doing is I give egg food in the morning, enough so that they have to feed about half of a teaspoon. And then when it comes time in the evening around 3 or 4 p.m., I give them about a teaspoon of sprouted seeds. And this is usually enough protein to stimulate them to continue to feed their chicks without tossing. Alright guys, well we've reached the end of another video and I hope that you've enjoyed this release of the red-throat parrot finches inside of the outdoor aviary. I hope that you guys have also learned a couple of new things from the tips that I gave you as far as how to get them into proper condition and get them set up so that they can take care of their own chicks. If you guys have enjoyed the video, like always, remember to leave me a like. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already, as this shows me your support and it helps me to continue making videos for the future. Also remember to hit that notifications button so you're notified when new videos are released. And like always guys, I hope that you have a wonderful day and we'll see each other in the next video.